Mike Perry has been in residency at Orley Park for the last 2 months. He lives and works in Pembrokeshire part of the time, but he also travels extensively. Mike, I understand that this has been a body of work you've been putting together for a really long time, although you've developed it further here. What was the original concept behind it?
Well, there wasn't really an original concept. I started by picking bits of plastic off the beach and being fascinated by the colour and shapes and form. It wasn't really a oh my god, there's an environmental thing I'm really worried about, I've got to do something. It was more as an artist being interested in forms and shapes, and I'd take these bits back to the barn. I started collecting them. I started making little books, almost like little natural history books, just photographing them with a small camera and making collections of this stuff. But then I started looking at it and thinking, I want to make something from this. And I've always shot with very large, highly detailed landscape plate cameras. And so I started experimenting with much more detailed camera. First of all with a 10-8 plate camera, and that became too expensive. And then I started with a forensic digital Hasselblad, which is a really, really detailed, highly detailed camera, because I really wanted you to see the scars and the form very, very close up. So to answer your question, it started really with me just picking up things and wanting to do something with them, but not quite knowing what to. And eventually, it clicked when I took my first individual picture and thought, actually, these are both beautiful and worrying symbols or signs of what is coming and what's happened.
What's happening in the world today?
What's happening on the planet, yeah.
When I came to talk here some time ago, what you actually did was to take us around the exhibits and explain some of your thoughts. Would you feel you could do that today for us?
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, the starting point really is, if I was to sum up this work, it's a kind of reflection on global consumption and consumerism. At the same time, a kind of looking at the way we're treating the world, just throwing everything in the sea. And it's also, though, increasingly, it's about how nature reshapes even the man-made, and how nature's creating these kind of new forms. Whether we like it or not, whether we're here in the future, it's going to carry on doing that. So it's also a study of, if you like, the sublime powers of nature, but on a more micro scale. These four here I call them sort of seascape abstracts. They're simply the sides of containers. You see sometimes washed up after a storm, these containers. They're just thrown over off trailers and boats, and sometimes washed over in storms. And by photographing just the sides of them, you can see all the details, the scratch marks. And for me, this is almost like a seascape painting, but it's nature inscribing itself on the man-made rather than man inscribing on with watercolours or paints on canvas. And I like the idea that these shapes sort of actually define years of sea and movement of sea. Just another way of coming at the idea of seascape. So these are, and this one in particular, you can see the plastic starting to break down and the filaments emerging. At first I thought this was sort of flora growing on the plastic, but actually it's the nature of plastic, the way it breaks down. It's made in this sort of strands. And
it almost looks like algae, doesn't it?
It looks like algae, and a lot of environmental photography is very dramatic and it shocks you, and should do that, and has an important purpose. But I wanted to, perhaps in reflection, let people sort of look at this stuff first, and then perhaps slowly in their minds think, actually, what is actually happening here? So it's a much more slower working process of people thinking about this stuff and how it's breaking down.
Is that a reaction to the speed of life today, and that you think everything should slow down a bit?
No, I think I don't think we look like we used to look. I think we're used to fast digital technology, where not post-digital technology, but sometimes it means we don't just sit and look at a book, or we don't just observe things perhaps in the way we used to. And I think so. It's not really a reaction to that. It's more about finding a fascination for me in what nature's doing on the micro scale, I think. As opposed to looking for the grand vista, the sublime power of nature on the macro scale, which has been so done. And I don't think it's, that doesn't excite me in the way it excited people in the 18th and 19th century.
Yeah.
This piece here is just a piece of, I think someone said it's a keep box for lobsters and fish and things. And for this one, I just like the kind of graphic form, and reminds me, I love that whole period in the 60s of sort of minimalist, modernist work. I just like this as a piece of sort of abstract form, but also when you get closer, you start to see the scratch marks and detail. It also has a slightly dark feel to me, sort of a cage, an idea, and sort of darkness to it.
Being shut within something.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
It's interesting too that you place this within the art field. Given the state of technology today and the fact that everybody seems to be going around taking pictures, including young kids with mobile phones, where do you see photography in the art world these days?
Well, I think it's great that photography can be done by anybody. I mean, the great thing about the digital revolution is it's made it very accessible. It's made it very democratic, and anybody can create images, which I think is a good thing. What it also means is you've got millions of pictures out there, and what's important is we keep looking hard. I actually think photography is a very strong. I think I don't believe. I think art can exist in any form.
Yes.
A great gardener can be an artist.
Yes.
A photographer, a filmmaker, a sculptor, a great cook. So I think this idea that art is just painting or art is sculpture is
dead in the water.
The most important thing is what have you created and how does that move people, or what does it communicate to people?
Yes.
Basically. So these are quite traditional in the sense they're still framed, they're still quite flat, they're still photographs.
They're very clear though, aren't they?
One of the things I wanted to do in choosing this work is to take a very objective approach. I mentioned before that a lot of environmental photography has very powerful imagery, sort of birds cut open with the stumps full of plastic, and they're very moving and powerful.
Shocking.
But I wanted to be very objective. I wanted us to look at these objects for themselves and what they are first, if you like. They're pure sculptural presence before any meaning of what they might be doing to the planet. So I wanted to separate those two things because I do find them, I'm not embarrassed to say, I wasn't first, that they are quite beautiful.
This one in particular is quite stunning.
I wanted to, so first of all I wanted people to look at them, so I shot them straight onto camera, one to one, so they're real size, but also with a very neutral light. So there's no sunset, there's no strong shadow. I didn't want to create emotion through the lighting. I wanted you to see them for what they were. So I shoot in a sort of control. It's daylight, but it's very flat, neutral light. So you're not distracted by anything other than the actual physicality of the shape and the form and what it is. Combine that then with a very detailed camera, very powerful camera.
What type of camera?
Well, it's an HD5 Hasselblad. It's about 65 megapixels, makes a megabyte, and I shoot on through a computer software, which allows me it allows me to get right in and see what I'm doing, which is great because with photography sometimes you shoot and then you wait 3 days to develop your film. You're not sure what you've got. With this, I can actually build up as I'm working. And what's extraordinary here is this allows you to see how things are breaking down. And the growth. Well, actually, it's not growth. This again is the filaments of the plastic breaking down. So I think the ones that are successful make you just think a little bit, and you're kind of in awe of the object. But at the same time, it's just a piece of plastic crate, but nature has given it something. Its own beauty. Its own beauty, and also its own sign of what we're doing. And it seems to me that being in the water, they're breaking down far faster than they do on the land. Yeah, well, the water, the salt, the sun, being bashed around, but still, I don't know the exact dates, but some of this plastic could be around 10,000 years, Some breaks down quicker, some doesn't break down, and this is a big problem, that even if we, rapidly try and do something now about it, there's still going to be plastic in the ocean for years and years. It's there, isn't it? There's nothing much that can be done. This is just a piece that aesthetically I found very beautiful, this sort of burnt orange, and it's a very sort of simple minimalist piece. This is a Chinese... Are you asking to cut now? Stigomerate. and it's a conglomeration of pebbles and stones held together with plastic, and they're now being found on beaches all over the world now. Scientists are calling this period we're in the Anthropocene, which is the period where man has had a greater impact on nature than nature itself. And
they look like a natural form, in fact.
well, this is what happens. Nature, if you like, molds these man-made products into forms that you think are natural.
Yeah.
But they're unnaturally natural, if you like. These pieces are just very simple card pieces. This is a flower pot, and sometimes I find the blandest, most mundane objects have the most interest, because I like the idea of taking something you just think, why have you picked that up? And turning it to something of some sort of significance, and I like that. And often the most dramatic piece I find doesn't make a better piece of artwork, because it's best left as a piece in itself. And if I can't add anything with photography. I like the idea of taking something people would just walk past and giving it.
Wouldn't notice that.
I wouldn't notice. Yeah. And these are similar, very bland pieces. Over here, this is called Glove, and I find that quite a lot of gloves. I don't know, it's fishermen throw them overboard, or workmen or something, but I like the idea of the sort of human story behind the glove. Whose was it, where does it come from? And it's almost like an artifact, found from a previous civilization. I like this idea. Again, the detail, when you get close, it could almost be in someone's hand.
It's still in there, almost.
It's still in there, exactly. This one's from Japan. Turned up on Kumguilog Beach, just near our. I mean, it's extraordinary. They travel around the world.
It's amazing, isn't it?
Oh, it's incredible. Apparently, they can get around the world in just a few weeks. This is it's obviously, I don't know what it is actually, but it's got shells growing on top of it, and the insides of sort of glue or something, or a spray or a foam or something. Fire extinguisher, maybe off a boat or a ship or something. It would be nice to put in a glass box. You couldn't get to it. So, apparently, I've got to put a health.
This is not for use.
Not for use in case of fire. But again, I love the sculptural quality that the sea can create something, something of something.
And the decay of the paint.
A bucket. My version of a Chinese bowl, an old Chinese, artifact. Just a bucket covered in from freshwater West Beach. And then plastic I found on various beaches in Pembrokeshire over the last few years. When you actually look closely and you're looking for them, you see that there's hundreds of them. And I only noticed them really when my wife picked one up and said, "This isn't stones, plastics." No. And we looked and realised actually many of the things you think are stones are actually just plastic that's gone hard.
Something like this, for instance, looks as though you could pick it up on Newgale and think
exactly.
This is
a
natural
fossils.
form.
Yeah, exactly. And some of these things, they're the size of. This is just lumps of congealed plastic that's got intertwined or stuck together with fishing rope and stuff. But this is what we're creating, new stones.
It's what our world will be composed of.
This is how we'll be remembered. We've created plastic rocks and plastic beaches. And you can go through any beach in Pembrokeshire and the rest of the world now. Put your hand through the sand and the stones, and you'll see there are these, plastic. A lot of these beads come from packaging, but plastic eventually gets into smaller and smaller pieces. And some of the statistics I've heard that the very tiny micro pieces are, from one bottle, one mineral water bottle, can disperse its pieces to every part of the world. It's extraordinary. What we've done to the planet is astonishing. I think we're only waking up now to realise that the damage, because this stuff's getting into the food chain, it's getting into the fish and
presumably we then eat it.
And then we eat it. And so it's not just the mercury and the heavy metals we're going to worry about now, it's the chemicals that go into the production of plastic.
What have you found the reaction of people to be when they've come in and seen this?
Well, I haven't been here all the time, but when I have been here, I've heard that people are fascinated. And I think some people are left, these are really beautiful, but at the same time, they, what are we doing? And that's kind of
what you want them
what
to
I
ask.
want them to think about, really, which is, to go away and think, well, yeah, this thing is a nice object, I can shoot it, but why is it here? And how do we allow this to happen? I know this has fascinated a lot of kids, the plastic.
Well, I think for them what it might do is make them look more closely.
Well, hopefully, and think, but also, you know, from an artistic point of view, to think about the nature of looking, that beauty is not just a sunset over St David's Head. You know, it can be in an object that has been discarded in your rubbish tip, or it can be something you walk past every day. And that there's a value in looking just beyond the cliche. That's something I think probably I would like to think the work is challenging, which is our ideas of landscape.
And it will bring people to that way of looking.
Yeah, well, someone said to me, you know, these aren't landscapes, why is it in the landscape gallery? And I said, well, I walk in the landscape to make this work, it's my process. They're found in the landscape, they're now very much part of the contemporary landscape. And for me, this is a way of reflecting on what we're doing to the landscape. So for me, they are landscapes.
And some of these actually look like small landscapes in themselves, don't they? That one in the far corner in particular.
Yeah, I mean, I think the actions of nature, the sea, the sand, is found. I think it was Einstein said that, you know, it's the whole of life is in one leaf. And I think, you know, the whole of the sea and the actions of the sea are in some of these bits of plastic. You know, the movement and how they get beaten around. And
I'm aware that you've got one particular panel outside which I find fascinating.
The shoes.
Of the shoes. Yeah. Perhaps we could go. No, he just wants you to stand for a second. It would seem to me, Mike, that these must have been taken over some length of time because there's a variety to them and they look as though they've come from different places. Perhaps you could talk about them a bit.
Yeah, I mean, I started finding shoes. It's amazing how many shoes there are on beaches. Some of them from Wales, it's from Wales, and then I started building up a collection. I'd already done a grid of bottles, 15 bottles in a show at Oriel Davis. And then I thought it would be really lovely to do a collection of shoes, and I've got so many.